What's going on, everyone? Back with another episode of Stuff and Things. We got some snow here in Colorado, but that is not going to stop us from checking out some new e-bikes. It seems like there are new e-bikes hitting the market every single day, even throughout these winter months, and there is a lot to choose from. This one, judging a book by its cover, might just be the best bang for your buck. It seems like it might be fitting into a very well-rounded category. It's not really an off-road mountain bike, but it does have some features that should allow you to ride it on some trails. I think it may also be a very good commuter bike because it is foldable, and sort of the icing on the cake is that it's coming in at a pretty affordable price, and the styling is a lot better than others out there on the market. That, of course, is just my opinion, so without further ado, let's jump right into it. We're taking a look at the Aventon Sinch. Now, Aventon has really been making a name for themselves over the past couple of years, mainly with their folding e-bike line like the Sinch right here. This is the newest model of the Sinch, and it is coming in at about $16.99 on their website right now. If you want to get some really detailed specs, I will leave a link in the description down below that you guys can check out, but for a brief overview, the simple stuff that everyone wants to know, this is a fat tire pedal assist electric bike, and it has a claim top speed of about 20 miles an hour with a 40-mile average range. The motor of the Sinch has a peak power output of 750 watts, and it has a removable lithium-ion battery putting out 48 volts and 14 amp hours. The bike uses pretty basic components, but it seems like Aventon really put the effort in where it was due. The motor seems solid. It does have those 4-inch fat tires, giving you a little bit of suspension. It is a hardtail, so there is no suspension in the rear, but up front, you'll find the RST guide front forks. Now, the frame is pretty beefy. I definitely dig the styling, but it comes in at a weight of about 68 pounds. It has a maximum weight limit of about 300 pounds, and depending on your riding terrain and your actual weight, that will be where the range actually varies. Now, the way this thing folds up is pretty dang slick. Much like other folding bikes out on the market, there's a little lever up front which you release, and then the handlebars fold down. There is a frame lever in the middle, which if you pop open, it will then fold up to be pretty dang compact, and then you can rest it on the ground on the little bar underneath. I think this would be perfect for throwing in the back of a truck, in the back of my van, or even if you're using this to commute into the office, you could probably wheel it in and store it underneath your desk. Now, one thing that I'm already going to give Aventon points for is putting real-world testing numbers on their website. A lot of companies out there will just throw out a random spec and you don't really know where it comes from, but if I pull up their website, under the real-world range testing right here, speed of up to 20 miles an hour, 30 miles with no pedaling, so if you're just using the thumb throttle, you should be able to get about 30 miles. And then they even put the specs of the rider. It says that they're riding on relatively flat terrain with a rider of 165 pounds. There are 5 different pedal assist levels. If you are on mode 1, you can go about 10 miles an hour for 71 miles, all the way up to mode 5, doing 20 miles an hour with a range of about 38 miles. Now, I currently weigh about 175 pounds, so I'm going to test this thing pretty close to how I would actually use this bike, which would be as a commuter. The terrain that I'm riding is going to be relatively flat, and being 175, 10 pounds more than their actual test numbers, I would expect my numbers to be a little bit less, but we won't know until we test it out and find out for ourselves. So let me put on a helmet and we'll go ride this thing for the very first time. Alright guys, here we go, out on some pretty typical bike paths for around the Denver area. We're going to take a look at these bars first. Pretty narrow, but that's kind of to be expected for a commuter style bike like this, especially because it folds. So right up here we have the PAS buttons, the pedal assist select buttons, and then if we press and hold the button on the front here, that will turn on the display. I'm happy to report that I'm wearing polarized sunglasses right now and I can see this clear as day. It's not always the case for different LCD screens out there, so that's a good plus. Now you can see I've already ridden 7 miles to get to the place that I'm at right now, and we still have a completely full battery. Now the energy bar on these displays are used on a lot of different bikes, but it will sort of fluctuate as you're pedaling, so if you're going up a really steep hill, it will show that you have almost no battery, but that is because you are using more power. So at the time, right now, I rode 7 miles and it says that we still have a full battery. Over on my right hand here is where you have the different gear selects. I'm currently in the 7th gear, 1 to 7. Over here, again, those controls, and then also a thumb throttle. Brakes are pretty standard as always, so let's just go for a quick spin with just the gears. There we go. Had to bump it down a little bit to get going, but that is one nice feature about this bike. There are some e-bikes out there that do use pedals, but it is basically like a fixed gear. That's great and all when you have an e-bike and you're using a cadence or even a torque sensor, but when you have different gears, if this bike ever dies, I can still ride it like a normal bike right now. There's no power going to it. Even the thumb throttle is not doing anything because I'm in pass mode 0. Now I'm going to start by bumping that up to mode 1. Now this bike runs off of a cadence sensor as opposed to a torque sensor, so once it senses me pedaling, it's going to give the power depending on which mode you're in. So this is probably like 10 to 15% power. Let's go up to mode 2. Now pedaling is getting a lot easier. I'm still in the 5th gear. Let's actually bump this all the way up to the top gear. So now I'm in 7th gear, cruising at about 13 miles an hour. On my way out here, the first 7 miles when I was gathering my thoughts, I was typically riding in pass mode 3 up to 5 depending on hills. Now all of this has been relatively flat, so should be pretty good for testing the overall range. Pass mode 3, currently going 15.5 miles per hour, go up to 4. This bike is very smooth. I noticed that when it's switching from a lower mode up to a higher mode, it's just a very gradual acceleration. Some bikes that use cadence sensors for the motors are a little bit finicky. You will find that if you stop pedaling, the bike will continue to go, or if you start pedaling, it will take a while to kick in. This one overall though is very smooth. And now we're going up a little bit of a hill, so let's go up to pass mode 5. Putting little to no effort in here when it comes to the pedaling. Going up a hill doing 19.8. There you go, 20 miles an hour. Even going a little bit faster than 20 because I'm helping pedaling, but this bike is very stable, as you can see. Some bikes, when it comes to fat tires anyway, I find it kind of hard to balance sometimes, especially riding without hands. But this bike so far has been very comfortable. 7 miles, the saddle or the seat, it's very cushy, feels pretty good. And then the overall ergonomics, I'm not gonna lie, feel kind of dorky. The seating position, I'm kind of sitting upright and I'm like kind of rigid and straight. I could actually move this seat up just a little bit. I had that down pretty low because I was folding this thing. So now let's continue on this trail. Highest gear, 7. I'm on mode 5. Got mud on the screen. Gentle pedaling to start. And then that 750 watt motor slowly picks up. Nice and smooth. It's got a really good acceleration curve. So just like that, again, barely pedaling, and I'm already up to 20 miles per hour. Let's see if we can go even faster. If I really pedal, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. So that's another thing that I like about Aventon. They're advertising realistic numbers. With the pedal assist and you not putting much effort in, the bike can do 20 miles an hour very easily. They could have easily said that the bike does 25 miles an hour because, as you saw, I just did that. But they don't do that because it's not realistic, and I had to use some effort to get it there. If you can't tell by the many rants throughout this video, I hate when companies lie about specs. They'll throw someone on a bike who weighs 120 pounds and they'll ride around a completely flat track. And then whatever those numbers are, they'll advertise at those specs. And that's just not realistic. So because Aventon does such a good job at advertising this, I honestly don't even feel the need to ride a full 40 miles today. I definitely could because this is basically effortless. I'm super comfortable. Again, the seating position feels a little bit dorky, but it's definitely a way cooler looking bike than some of the other ones that I've tested out. Now that I raise the seat up, this is even more comfortable to pedal because I have it adjusted to my actual height, and I could totally ride this thing all day. I'm surprised it's so beautiful right now. Middle of January, Colorado. Loving the sunshine though. So before we get going too far, let's check out the thumb throttle, because if you're super lazy, like sometimes I am, you're going to want to use that throttle. Now, I believe on the older version of this cinch, it did not have this function that I'm about to show you. In order to use a thumb throttle, you needed to have the bike going up to a certain speed, and then the thumb throttle would engage the motor. On this one, however, if I just press the throttle with my thumb, you can start right from a dead stop. So let's see how this goes. Highest mode, I'm on mode 5. Not gonna pedal, just gonna rest my feet up here. And then no pedaling, just thumb throttle. Now that wasn't super quick off the line like an electric dirt bike or something like that, but here we go, I'm already doing 20 miles an hour. This thing feels pretty dang good. That guy didn't wave back because he's pedaling a bike. What a loser. I don't need to pedal for dog. Check out all the tumbleweeds on this trail right here. It's like I'm riding through a gauntlet. Just gotta swerve around everything. This bike feels pretty planted too. I'm not a huge fat tire bike fan, but it definitely makes the ride really comfortable, especially because this is like a hardtail. There's no rear suspension. The front suspension on my way out here definitely feels pretty good. I hopped over some curbs, hopped up some curbs, just typical like commute style riding. And even though the wheel size is a lot smaller than say like a normal bike or a mountain bike, it still feels pretty good. It's definitely very maneuverable. Now this bike isn't really marketed as an off-road bike, but I still think it'd be good for dirt trails like this. You can see all these prairie dogs running around here. They're chirping. Again, no rear suspension, so it's not going to be the smoothest ride ever, but fat tires definitely helps. You can get a little bit of air over these prairie dog mounds. Woo! All right, this is pretty fun actually. Woo! Oh, there's a bigger one. Ugh. This bike is not made for jumping. Oh, I should also note that these pedals that I'm standing on also fold up, just like most folding e-bikes. I don't know how much I should be trusting those while jumping, but again, that's not what this bike is really made for. Prairie dogs. Alright, well, I'm gonna ride this thing a little bit more, especially on this little like power line trail, because these little jumps are kind of fun. And then once I'm tired of riding, we'll jump right into some final thoughts. Alright guys, so I have just about wrapped up the first ride. We've gone a little over 15 miles and we still have over half of the battery life left. I ended up getting kind of muddy in the process, and as you can tell, the bike is also pretty dang muddy as well, so it did alright on the little bit of dirt trails that I was riding on, but I think this thing is really suited more towards a commuter. If you live in an urban environment and you are thinking about getting rid of an actual vehicle to get to work, and you want to go an e-bike route, I think this would be a pretty good option. I really appreciate the fact that Aventon did not over-exaggerate their numbers, and also instead of putting money into these like fancy frilly parts like some fancy gear shifters and brakes, you can tell that they focused their design on the battery, the actual motor, and the overall aesthetics of the bike itself. If I were to build my own e-bike, those are the first three things that I would actually focus on. The motor probably first, and then the battery to support that, and then aesthetics. Everything else after that is just an added bonus. And there's nothing on this bike so far that I've found was bad. Everything seemed pretty dang good. Now, because we still have some sunlight left, I'm going to continue riding this bike, and then I will put the final numbers of total distance traveled down in the description below. I'll also leave a link for the bike down there if you want to check out some more technical specs for yourself. And also, if you have any questions on the Aventon Sinch, let me know in the comments down below, and I will try to answer anything as best as possible. I think that's going to be all for today. I'm going to go ride a little bit more, but if you guys are new to this channel, consider clicking subscribe. I make new videos every week. As always, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one.